Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Lineup HQ Breakdown Show, and we're talking about 6-game slate today. And I'm happy to be joined by one of, if not the very sharpest mind in the biz. It's Dave Potts. Cheese is good. What's up, Cheese?
Good morning to you. Looking sharp today, Mr. Roth.
Yes, I always dress like
as
this.
per usual, right?
Yeah.
Yep, got a good little 6-game early slate here. Sort of a weird time slot. We don't usually get the 3:05 Eastern slate, but it's a good one.
It is a good one. I'm excited about it. And to be clear, while all the RotoGrinders people know that I'm just a normal dude in a t-shirt, I had to do a PR hit or a few PR hits. So then I have to dress up and be like fancy meteorologist. So this is my fancy meteorologist clothes that I'm currently holding over.
We fully support that dress code. It looks great on you.
Don't get used to it. It's literally never happening again on RotoGrinders. Hey, speaking of weather, of course, weather is actually fairly interesting for this 3 o'clock slate, and not in a bad way, in a good way. The weather is interesting, and we still have that heat wave out west. So Colorado, geez, what do we have, like 17 runs or something last night?
Yeah, wow. Milwaukee scored early, Colorado scored late.
Yep. It's another hot day in Colorado. High temperatures are going to be in the mid 90s for most of that game. It's warm in Oakland. You look at the Angels game and the Dodgers game, the temperature is going to be 100 degrees in both spots. The winds are blowing out. This is very, very good hitting weather in those locations. So I am always a fan.
They're early games compared to the normal. Doesn't that also help?
Yes, because if you get these late games out west, you get the marine layer starting to work in, and that can deaden the ball. You get day games, there's no marine layer. It's 100 degrees. Winds are blowing out. There are a lot of factors going towards a good amount of home runs and runs in those games.
Excellent.
So I approve. But nobody wants to hear me ramble about weather, Cheese. They want to hear you ramble about what we're going to do. And you can talk about the slate or you can talk about pitchers, whatever floats your boat, my man.
Okay. So the big picture is there's actually a ton of everything. There's several really good pitchers that make a very clear top tier with a couple of chalk. And then cores will be the chalk, but there's also several very pretty obvious good pivots. So we end up kind of crossing off half of the slate on both sides. But that still leaves us a lot to focus on.
Okay, well, I'm seeing right off the top, there's this guy named Spencer Schreider, and all I know about him is that he strikes dudes out.
Even before the 16 strikeout game last week, I mean, the strikeouts were just so good. Like if you look at these games, it gives you such a high floor. Like, and they're letting him pitch deep. The upside is ridiculous.
He's got an awesome mustache.
Yeah, he's in Oakland. Even with the weather, it's still Oakland, and Oakland got to Kyle right last night. But Spencer Strider is a whole other level of strikeouts. And he's still cheap on DK. On FanDuel, he's not cheap, but he's still cheaper than Castillo. Strider is the chalk, and I think he's great chalk, and I think he plays Strider. Louis Castillo is the second guy. He's cheaper than Kershaw on DK. Kershaw is probably still sort of limited. He's amazing. Like you can play Kershaw anytime you want for any reason, but his ceiling is just not there right now because they're getting ready for the playoffs. So he's probably going to throw 80-ish pitches. He could throw 90, but there's no ceiling there. Okay. And Castillo also has a better matchup. Like his skill set works perfectly against the White Sox. So I think Strider Castillo is the very obvious, very chalky combo.
And very good combo.
And very good. But then we also have Patrick Sandoval, who has finally come to life. And it actually started 3 weeks ago against the Tigers when he had his best game of his career. He's not Strider or Castillo. Consistency? I'm not sure that's a word. Consistency-wise. Yeah. He does have ceiling, and he's very good. But he's not going to be sneaky because so many people will spread out. And I just like Strider and Castillo better. By all means, Sandoval belongs in that top tier. And the bigger picture is there's a huge dip after those four guys. And to me, really, it's even three. I'm not really using Kershaw personally.
Okay, after this dip, is there still like some nibbling you want to do after this dip, or are you like,
So
that's the dip and I'm done?
it's got to be, you've got to really need the salary
Mhm.
to dip as much as possible. I want two of Strider, Castillo, Sandoval everywhere. And on FanDuel, they're all right around 10K and quite reachable. So I'm not playing Alex Cobb or Eric Lauer or Michael Kopech. Like there are too many red flags and problems with the matchups. Um, the only guy I'm kind of considering in the mid tier is Domingo Herman, but I don't like him. This is a low strikeout pitcher. I don't love it. To me, if you're going cheap, you're going all the way cheap. We have two rookies. We got Waldachuk for Oakland, and we have this new guy. This will be his first career start, Louis Varland, the
Ooh.
Twins rookie against the Yankees. They're both 5,500 on DK. They're both very good in the minors, and who knows?
That's so
Walden,
fun. Like
yeah,
that's just I love playing these like dirt cheap guys that were good in the minors, and you just don't know what you're gonna get. But at
yeah,
that price, like I'll throw a dart.
yep. So Waldachuk's made one start, and he got the strikeouts, but he also had sketchy control, and it's not even showing up. But he had like 6 strikeouts and 4 walks. These are just wild cards, and to me, I would much rather be facing the Yankees right now than the Braves. And so I'm going Varland as the cheap guy of choice.
Makes sense.
There's also, it's a double header with the Yankees. We don't have lineups yet, but most likely their already kind of weakened lineup is probably not going to be anything like full strength. And it's really not that bad of a matchup. So to me, it's aces or it's Varland. And feel free to throw Waldachuk in there along with Varland.
Right. So Judge is gonna hit 2 bombs, but he's still gonna be like an okay play.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like with the pricing on Waldachuk and Varland, Judge can hit 2 homers and Riley can hit 2 homers, and these pitchers can still be totally fine.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Well, let's talk about some of the hitters, some of the stacks. I mentioned weather-wise, there's a ton of good bats, and I think you mentioned there's just some good spots in general.
Yeah, it's very obviously the Brewers, the Rockies, righties, and then Trout and Ohtani is the chalk of this slate. I actually think Trout and Ohtani are probably even chalkier than the Brewers because they're facing the one truly bad pitcher on this slate is Hutchinson.
Mhm.
There's no N in his name. I really want to call him Hutchinson, but it's Hutchison. If you have money, I want Trout and Ohtani much more than I want Adames and Renfroe or Crone and Grichuk, whoever you like from that Coors game. But that means like even on a small 6-game slate, anything outside of Coors Field and those 2 Angels is going to be sneaky. And that leaves the Braves, the Dodgers, the Yankees, and the Mariners as teams that I really like stacking. They're way off the board, even though these are great teams. I mean, the Braves and the Dodgers are arguably the 2 best teams in the league offensively, and they're both going to be sneaky. And both in those warm weather games. And then the Mariners I love with Kopech coming off the IL and being kind of terrible to begin with.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about position by position. I know that at the time we're recording this, it's a little early. We don't have lineups out on, I don't know, most of these games, if not all of them.
Yeah.
So there could be some guys you mentioned that end up not making the cut. But in general, you think you can still go position by position?
Yeah. Definitely keep in mind where there'll be a couple of weird lineups, especially in that Yankees Twins game with it being the first of a doubleheader. But like salary is going to be an issue at some point because of how much you want to spend up for those aces. So we're going to look for cheap bats where we can get them, especially on DK, which will probably make Victor Caratini, assuming he's in the lineup, the catcher chalk. Diaz and Will Smith I like better than Caratini, but catcher is not going to be the priority spend up spot. I also like Cal Raleigh and Darno quite a bit, but they're also kind of priced up. So I don't mind just punting with Caratini, even on his own, and don't feel like you have to stack around him.
Yeah, look at the big dumper, price up to 4-1, man. That's
all he does is hit him out. Yeah,
I'm happy for the big dumper. All right, let's go to first base.
So on DK, you can play Ohtani at first. But Keston Hiura is kind of the big question mark for me. Like 3,100 on DK and I'm going to kind of switch back and forth with FanDuel, and 29 on FanDuel. Now on FanDuel, you probably play him at second, but that's really cheap for a guy probably hitting in the middle of the order for the Brewers today. Personally, like the idea of Keston Hiura chalk, I just don't like it. So anywhere it's possible, I would love to play Ohtani on DK. Montero for Colorado, I prefer as the cheap guy over Hiura, though he's not sneaky either. I think Mike Ford, if he's in the lineup, again, there's a bunch of unknowns, especially like this Angels lineup. I don't know who's playing, but if minimum salary Mike Ford is in there, I'm going to use him as another pivot off of Hiura and Montero.
Gotcha.
The spend up guys here, other than Ohtani, are more in stacks for me.
Anything that makes more sense if you are going to play Ohtani to put him at first because we've got more options in the outfield, I assume?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, well, let's go to second base.
Second base, on FanDuel, you've got the 2 Brewers and Brendan Rodgers. Actually, 3 Brewers if Wong's in there, but I'm not really counting him. Urias, Hiura, and Rodgers are all under 3K on FanDuel, and Max Muncy is 2,400. This kind of makes everything possible on FanDuel. I think I prefer Rodgers and Muncy over the Brewers. I'm just trying to not play all the Brewers. I don't love them as much against lefties. Whereas on DK, you'll notice this name, Mookie Betts at second base. Kevin, does that sound normal to you?
Mookie Betts sounds like a name I know, but not at second base.
Yeah. That really makes this position interesting. Like, he is not a priority spend on this slate at all against Alex Cobb, but the fact that he can be played at second base on DK is very interesting. Urias is the chalk and kind of the best points per dollar play, but I would rather go to Brendan Rodgers as a one-off. But the cheap stuff is not inspiring. Like, it's, Vaughn Grissom in a stack, sure. But I think you play either be goofy and spend up to Betts, play Rodgers, or play a guy in your stack.
Okay, let's go to third.
So I mentioned Montero at first base for the Rockies. He's third base only on FanDuel. He's cheap. He's pretty good, and he's facing Lauer. He'll probably hit fourth or fifth.
What is that first name?
Illuris.
Oh, okay.
He's good. I think he is pretty good chalk. On FanDuel, because Urias and Muncy are so cheap, like, I'm not even sure he'll be that chalky. I'm a little more concerned about it on DK, where he's only 2,500. But that's a really good price. And I would rather play the pitchers I want and have to play a couple chalky, cheap guys, with him and Caratini kind of being the 2 that are sticking out to me, and say, let's just play them and then get different somewhere else. Austin Riley, Max Muncy, Eugenio Suarez, interesting spend ups, but not like you have to play them.
Okay, very good. Take me to the shortstop, sir.
Willy Adames chalk. He and Renfroe and McCutchen are going to be kind of the obvious Brewers guys, middle of the lineup righties against a lefty. But he is very expensive and very chalky. Certainly in any other stacks, like, I would definitely want Trey Turner in any Dodger stack. Like, Trey Turner is going to be sneaky because of the salary and the matchup. Even David Fletcher, a guy who's not particularly good. If you're playing Trout and Ohtani, you can't really just play Adames too and play pitchers. So I think just play the cheap correlation with it. Mm-hmm. Probably Garrett Hampson will be in the lineup, and he's 2,300. That's fine. On FanDuel, I'd rather play a cheap nonsense Javi Baez, although this is not the kind of matchup where I love Javi Baez either. And you also have Urias is available. He's triple position eligible on FanDuel at a pretty big savings over Adames. So if you're playing the Brewers, if you're playing a bunch of Brewer stacks, maybe make one without Adames, just to be different, and you can still use your shortstop from Milwaukee.
So what are you doing in cash? Like on DK at short, was there a play there?
You get up to Adames there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And if you can't, I think you go all the way down to Hampson.
Okay.
I think those are your options. You don't really need to middle with David Fletcher. Just get up to Adames, who's the best play, or go all the way down to Hampson.
Okay. It just seems weird. Like when I think of spending up, I think about Ohtani and Trout and guys like that, just in general spending up, not at this position.
So that's, and
Adames.
this position is the reason why I'm kind of focused on Caratini and Montero at catcher and third. Like you do need a couple very cheap guys, and those guys are better players than Garrett Hampson and David Fletcher.
I see. Okay. Well, let's go to the outfield and talk about some other spend ups and probably some cheapies as well.
Yeah. So this is where we have the Trout, Ohtani, and then Judge probably ends up sneaky-ish for the size of the slate because Renfroe and McCutchen also come in ahead of him, and probably even Yelich. So you got the 2 Angels and the 3 Brewers. Even Randall Grichuk would probably be more popular than Aaron Judge. I don't know. How does that sound to you, Kevin? Do you want Randall Grichuk or Aaron Judge?
It's just silly. Like he's going to hit a home run. It's what he's going to do.
And he's so expensive, right? Like you're going to probably need to play one of the cheap pitchers if you're playing him. And what I would say with that is it's okay to play Varland and Judge in the same lineup on a 6-game slate. Like I would not be afraid of that.
Okay.
On FanDuel, McCutchen is a standout at 2,900. And like Renfroe is not as much of a priority. I think Trout and Ohtani are the priorities over Renfroe on FanDuel. And it's also, you don't need to scrape the barrel as much on FanDuel because of those guys who are right around 3K or less. But DK, McCutchen at 43 is and Grichuk at 41 are kind of the cheapest top tier type plays. Assuming Tyrone Taylor's in the lineup, he's the good cheap. He's kind of the cash game chalk, 2,900 on DK. Taylor Ward is quite viable at 3,500. And then we've got these 2 more rookies. We're going to assume Bouchard and Toglia are both in the lineup. They're both under 3K. They both have power. These are more good cash game plays. Like I think you can get away with Taylor and one of these Rockies with Trout. Although ideally you spend up on 2 and spend down on just 1, where my preference would be Taylor. And then if you want to get away from cores in tournaments, Max Kepler is kind of there. Jake Cave is kind of there. Herman is the type of guy I don't mind one-off power bats against. He throws a bunch of strikes. He's not striking anybody out. The Twins should theoretically be able to hit a home run. Cave and Kepler are kind of the guys I'm looking for. Ozuna's 2,400 on DK. Those are the only individual names that really stand out to me, with everything else being okay, mid-range, stacky. And that's it. So basically the outfield is really good up top, but it's not super deep. It's pretty clear where all the chalk goes to the Angels and the Brewers with a couple of Rockies. And then the cheap guys are also Brewers and Rockies.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask you to basically sum up everything you just said, which, hey, you remember the last 15 minutes? Say it in 2 sentences. At pitcher here, you've got a condensed pool. You like these top tier guys. How are you getting different in tournaments, just in general, going with the pitchers that are going to be chalky and good and high owned and expensive?
Yeah. My preference in tournaments is to get the chalk pitchers, go Schreider, Castillo, and go to Mariners or Dodgers or Braves as stacks, because those are totally off the radar. And with those, it's totally okay to just put in whatever cheap guys make the lineup to make the lineups work, because they will not be chalky. I'm going to be underweight the Brewers here. Just in general, I don't love them as much against lefties. They could even get some pinch hitting going on, depending on what the lineup looks like. And there's upside around the slate. So I'm okay to play the cheap, like 1 or 2 cheap Rockies and or Caratini or Tyrone Taylor on their own, if I'm stacking something like the Yankees or the Mariners or the Dodgers or the Braves, who are off the radar.
Gotcha.
That's different enough on a 6-game slate. If you're not stacking cores and you're not just going Trout, Ohtani, Ward, I think that's kind of where the chalk congregates. As long as you're doing something different than that, I think you're okay.
Okay. Wonderful answer and excellent work as always. That is why we not only have the best tools in the biz here at RotoGrinders, but the best analysis as well. It is
And the best dressers.
The best. You can't argue that. We're both rocking collars today. Like how lucky can they get? Hey, that is it. That is the Lineup HQ breakdown show. We're going to be back as regularly scheduled for a normal crunch time with 35 minutes before lock later on tonight for the evening slate. Cheese, you going to be with me? I don't know.
I believe so.
Excellent. Good. Looking forward to seeing you again. And everybody, we appreciate you. We will catch you a little bit later on tonight. Have a good one.